Hey guys, Henning and Morten from FlippedNormals here, and in today's video we are going to take a look at how you can use RetopoFlow for Blender and also some really cool Retopo concepts which can really improve your work.
So let's jump into Blender and take a look at the most anticipated add-on of the year.
With RetopoFlow installed, we simply have to click on the object we want to retopologize, and then we go to RetopoFlow, and then we click Create New Target. This is going to make this model a target, and it's going to allow us to retopologize on top of that. When we click it, we're going to see this menu popping up, and it's going to go into RetopoFlow mode. This is a mode which has all the tools readily available, and it's easy to use. It really removes all the clutter from Blender. As a little heads up, before you are starting to retopologize, you need to make sure that your model is decimated. Currently, this model is around 75,000 points, but if you're bringing something like a 2 million poly model, it's going to break. Nothing is going to work. So if it's really slow for you, first check that your model is really low poly first. So now we are in RetopoFlow mode. Now, just before we get too deep into that, this video is going to be comprised of two parts. The first part is going to be us going through the different tools we are using, actually how to use RetopoFlow. And the second part is going to cover how you can actually retopologize with some proper theory and concepts. We're not going to do this whole head, but we'll get as far as we really need to in order to explain the concepts. So you can also find timestamps as well where we're covering the different topics. So the first tool we are looking at is contours. Contours is a really useful tool for retopologizing things like arms and hands, and in this case, the neck. Every tool in RetopoFlow will be using the control key and the left mouse button, just a regular click, to create geometry. If you want to create geometry for the contours, simply just hold on the control key and just drag. And now you can see that we have created a line all the way around this. If we want to increase or decrease the spans, we can hit the plus and the minus key on the keyboard, or we can use the shift key and just drag up and down like so. Then in order to create more spans, we can hold on the control key and just drag more. And now you can see that we have created nice geometry going across like so. This is not necessarily the best use case for this tool. It is useful for the neck, but this is far more useful for things like fingers and hands and other limbs like that.
Any cylindrical piece of geometry, it's made for that basically.
It's really useful. Then also as a little tip as well for RetopoFlow, you can find tool settings for every single tool and documentation. If you hit the F1 key, this is going to bring up the general help. And if you hit the F2 key, it's going to give you tooltips for the specific tool you are using. So I really recommend looking through the general help section as well, figuring out just what's being covered and how you can use the tools better. So contours, a really useful tool for creating geometry like this. The general selection in Blender still applies to RetopoFlow as well. So if you want to deselect something, you can see the selection is in green. You simply hit Alt and A. If you want to select everything, you hit the A key. Then we have PolyStrips. PolyStrips is a really useful tool for blocking out your general loops. This is what you might want to use this for an area like maybe the forehead. If again we hold on a control key and then we drag out, we can just draw now. You see that we are creating a line. And now you can see that we have created a strip of polys, which we can now manipulate. We have two handles on either side, which we can now start to move around, and we can move this up and down. And then we can also change the angle of it as well, which really allows you a lot of creativity and a lot of freedom when you're doing your initial block arts. You can also hit the plus and the minus key as well to change the spans as well. And you can see the span here is being shown. You have six polygons here. And if you go down to the bottom, you can see how your overall scene poly count. This does not include the target mesh. This is only what's currently in your scene. As a little tip as well, while we're at it, if you look all the way to the bottom, you can see we have some general tool tips for the specific tool selected. So you can see the hotkeys for the PolyStrips tool. You can see something like increase segments and decrease segments. So if you want to create a new one, you can hit Alt A, which is going to deselect it. And then we can simply draw out another one like so, and you can just move this around. You'll also see that the the strip width is determined by your brush size, which you can get access to by hitting the F key. So if we hit the F key now, you can see that this goes up and down. So if you want to make this even smaller, and we hold down the control key and drag, you can now see that we get significantly smaller polygons, meaning that you're going to get more polys in this area, which again, you can change with the plus and the minus key. So really useful tool. Then we're just going to delete everything because our scene is getting a bit messy. And we can do this by selecting everything here, by hitting the A key. If you hit the X key, you now get the delete and dissolve menu. In this case, we're going to go to delete and just hit delete vertices. Then we're going to look into the strokes tool. This is one of my favorite tools of RetopoFlow and allows you to really quickly create awesome geometry. I find this to be a bit better than PolyStrips because I have more control this way. I have more precision. Where this is useful is if you want to, for instance, create a loop going down his nasolabial fold. So if you hold on a control key, like with everything, control creates geometry. You can now just drag this down like so. And you can now see you have 8 polygons in this strip, which you can increase or decrease with a plus and a minus key, like before. And then with this selected, you can see it's selected because it's green. You can hold the control key and you can draw another strip like so and go down here. Now you can see it's going to be bridged like this. I prefer this because it gives me a lot more precision than PolyStrips. I really control each individual part of it because I'm using my cursor, while with PolyStrips it's more you control the ends of it.
The nice thing is here you can sort of define the size and the thickness of your polygons as well. Notice how sort of on the cheeks there's more fat, so maybe the polygons are a little further apart, for example. It just gives you a lot more control this way.
We can also increase and decrease the spans between it by the plus and minus key. This is why I prefer to keep this set to the lowest. I don't really want any spans between this. That's a personal preference. I prefer to work in a way more low poly, but more on that later in the theory part. What you can also do is if you just click somewhere else, you're going to deselect what was selected, or you can hit, again, Alt and A. What you can do is you can select one of these loops, one of these edges, hold down the control key, and then we can start to drag it out. And now you can see that we can just quickly drag out a loop like this. If you want to drag out more from these ones, you want to drag all this down, hold down the control key, and just drag it down like so, which is really useful. It means you can create a lot of polys very quickly. As a little heads up, it doesn't work crazy well if you do a lot of crazy curves like this, just because the edges aren't perpendicular to the point. They stay at the same orientation as the current one, but it works really well if you're creating things which doesn't have too much of a curve in them. Again, plus and minus to increase and decrease the amount of segments. Then we have patches. Patches is currently being improved, and I do have some issues with it, so I don't tend to use this a whole lot. But the theory of it, which works pretty well right now, is that you can select one edge here. You can double click an edge like this, and this creates polygons for all of these edges. You can do this as well, and you see all the highlights here, where you see 2 times 7, and you know how many polygons you're going to be creating now. So really useful in cases like exactly this one here, where you just select this. You can also use this to bridge polys as well, where you select one, you select the other, and you hit the F key to bridge it. F or Enter will commit to it. It doesn't work in all cases, so when it works, it's amazing, but there are some cases where it's not fantastic. Like in the case of this, where currently it will overlap it like so, which means this is not a great scenario for it. Then we have the PolyPen Tool. The PolyPen Tool is amazing and is one of the tools I'm using the most. The tools I'm using really the most so far will be the PolyPen and the Strokes tool. This is a fantastic tool for general retopo. You're spending a lot of time tweaking and just adding loops here or adding topology here and there instead of just adding the big loops. The PolyPen tool works by hitting the control key. Then you can create a point. If you click another one, then you create a line. And if you draw again, you get a triangle, and if you click again, you get a quad, which is really useful because now you can just click this edge, and if an edge is selected, it will draw a triangle. If a triangle is selected, it will draw a quad. Where you can change this is if you click Control, and I'm not sure what this icon is called on the keyboard, but it's the one right above the tab icon. So if you hit Control and that one?
I think that's the tilde key.
Then that's a tilde key.
I think so.
Then it might be. Then we have the settings for it, which is try quad or quad only. So if we set this to quad only, which is how I prefer to work, we can just change this here.
Just imagine if you're putting down 2000 polys by hand. Now you just have to click once to create a quad instead of clicking twice to create first a triangle, then a quad.
It's just really useful for my workflow, which I just love. If you don't find this key on your keyboard, which you might not if you have something like a Norwegian keyboard or something like a not international one, you can still go to the settings. In the options to the top right, you will see the PolyPen, and you can set this to quad only, edges only, or try quad as well. And while we are on the topic of the potentially named tilde key, we have another menu as well, which is under the same key. If you just click the tilde key, you can now see we have a general radial menu. This is how I prefer to work. I don't really use any of the interface items because it's just, I have to click here, and go between them. So I prefer to just go between for instance, the PolyStrips tool, then the PolyPen tool, contours. It's just a lot quicker than having to go over here as well. In the documentation, you can also find the various hotkeys for the tools as well. Even if you hover over it now, you can see, for instance, it's 1 or it's Control-Alt-C. So you can, for instance, use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But even that, I just prefer to use the menu. I just find it to be more intuitive, but that's up to you. So back to the PolyPen tool. If we select an edge and just hold on the Control key, we are now creating new geometry like this. If we select this edge and we hold on the Control key, and it will now bridge it with this. It will merge it with this edge, which is why this is so powerful. So it means that you can very quickly create a lot of good topology in certain areas. For instance, if you want to create a loop going from here to here, you hit the Control key, draw out a single line, hold it on the Control key again, and now we can just start to block in this entire line like so. If you want to keep adding to this, you can drag it up like so, and we can just keep on working. If you, for instance, are in a case where you want to bridge these two, you can just hold on a Control key and just bridge these two like so. So it's one of these tools where it's great for manual work. If you want to quickly block something in, PolyStrips or strokes is fantastic, but for general work, the PolyPen tool is what you're going to be using the most. Also, if you click a point, then you can also just move this point individually as well. You have a lot of control with this approach. You can do the same if you select a polygon. You can click on that, move it around, same with edge as well. Then we have the loops tool. The loops tool allows you to, if you hold down the Control key, insert loops. And this will conform to the surface. If you see here, if you undo real quick, if you see here, now it's straight. And then if you hold on the Control key with the loops tool, it will now conform to it. If you just left mouse button on it, just drag it normally, it will just conform to what we have like so as well. If you double click, this will select a loop. So for instance, if you want to remove this loop, you just simply double click it, then you hit the X key, and then you go to dissolve, and you go to dissolve edges. And that's going to remove this loop. Then we have the tweak tool. This is really useful as well. This is a tool you can use to really tweak what you have, the topology you already have. It's not used for adding new things. It's just used for, like the name implies, tweaking, which means that we can now just go in and we can just click on the verts. Currently, this only supports verts. So you can't use this to select a polygon or an edge, only verts for now. If you hit the F key, you can now change the brush size of it, which allows you to move it up and down. And if we hit Control F, we can change the fall off like so. Which also changes visually in a very strong way. And if we hit Shift F, now we can change the intensity of it. So I prefer to work with as high intensity as possible, just because this allows me to really tweak something like this. So now you have a really strong tweak tool, which you can use to move stuff around. Then we have the relax tool, which does also exactly what it's implied. If you just hold down the left mouse button, it will just relax whatever you have. This is one of these essential tools you just need when doing Retopo, because you're not going to get it right the first time. As a little note as well, if you, for instance, are in the PolyPen tool and you want to move this around, You can, of course, just move it around like this, just by left mouse button dragging on it. Or you can use the G key, just the regular move tool in Blender. You can use the S key to scale it up. And you can use the R key to rotate it around like so. This, of course, works with multiple selections as well. If you just hold down the Shift key and you select multiple polys, you can do the same thing.
The nice thing is that everything is sort of snapped to the mesh by default. So all changes that you do will automatically conform to your underlying mesh.
Then we have a last tool we have to look at as well out of these. That is the symmetry tool. If we go to, in the top right, options, symmetry, and we set this to X. Now we're going to get symmetry across the X axis. This can be a little bit annoying sometimes, particularly if you get a bit close to this area and you can, for instance, now see, if you want to add topology here, you have a line in the middle and you might be confused by what's going on here. In that case, I simply just turn it off and then I just turn it on again. This is not a live modifier in the sense that if you go out of RetopoFlow, then it will be a modifier. This will be baked into your model. So if you exit RetopoFlow, then you will have this model as it is right now. So RetopoFlow is an incredible tool and it allows you to create topology really quickly. Now with the tools we have discussed, we will now start to do some quick retopo theory. We will quickly just select everything and then we'll delete it. Then we'll just select just the X key and just hit delete vertices. And we'll start off by blocking in some main loops. Some of my philosophy when it comes to retopologizing is get the main loops right first, and then you start to block it in. You don't start to go here and you just perfect the eye. It's going to be impossible to connect something up.
Yeah, one thing you don't want to get lost in when you're doing retopology is details. It's very easy to get distracted by, especially if you have a detailed model, like wrinkles and tiny little things, imperfections in the skin, but what you're after are the overall shapes on the face.
So we'll be starting with the strokes tool enabled. You can also just hit maybe the tilde key, and then we can go to strokes. And this is a phenomenal tool. I'm going to disable symmetry for now. It's a little bit easier to see what's going on. And then I'll start to just draw out by holding down the control key, just draw out a circle around the eye like so. And then you're going to be seeing that we have now 16 segments. I'm just going to decrease that to something like 12. And then we're going to draw a second circle around the eyes like so. And now you can see we have created a topology. As a general tip, I prefer to tweak this right away. I really like to draw something out, make sure it's nice, and then draw more things out. So for instance, in this case, I would like these polygons to be a bit more even. So we can go in and tweak tool, use your hotkey, tweak tool, hit the F key, move it down a little bit, and then we're just going to spend a little bit of time tweaking this.
And keep in mind that different parts of the face typically require different resolutions. So something like the nose might use bigger faces compared to close to the eyes, for example. You want more detail in there, even in the topology.
So keep it really light right away. Don't go too much above this. We just want to block in the loops. And again, the strokes tool is fantastic for this. So what we have to do now is we really have to remember to hit Alt-A or deselect everything, because otherwise it's going to try to do this. It's going to try to actually connect things up from this, which it can't. So Alt-A, and then we can draw out the second loop. And we're going to be drawing this from around here. And it doesn't have to be perfect. We can always tweak this later on. So now we have one line, and we just want to draw this out as well, like so. And now you can see we have another loop. Hit the minus key, because I don't want any more spans in the middle, because this is another theory point as well when it comes to retopo. Keep it as light as possible for as long as possible. It's going to be so much easier to connect things up. One of my philosophies as well is slow is fast. It might look like if you're just blocking things out using something like polystrips and contours, that is a really fast way of working. And it's a really fast way of blocking out geometry, but it might not be a good way of actually making the final result, because so much of the work with retopology is connecting the different loops up, and doing it this slowly and methodically really speeds that process up.
You run into the issue that you often do with automatic retopo solutions as well, where what you initially create looks good, But once you actually start connecting things up and editing it, it doesn't actually work that well.
Yeah, it's just a problem. You just want to work slowly and methodically. So in this case, I actually have too many loops here, I think. So I want to just undo this real quick, and then we can draw out another one. And then it's important that you change the loops in the first stroke. Something like 8 might be a bit better. The reason I thought it was a bit too much is because you want it to be light. You really want to go lighter and add more things instead of going too heavy.
And there isn't a spreadsheet that outlines every part of the face or body, whatever it is that needs to be retopologized, how many spans are needed. It's just experience. You figure out how few can you usually get away with.
Then I'm going to draw a line out around here. Again, hit Alt-A to deselect everything. Then we're just going to draw a line like so. And then we are just going to remove a few, maybe 2. And then we're going to draw out another line like so. And then it connects it up and hit the minus key. And what I'm kind of thinking about now when I'm doing this is, does this connect up with this? It doesn't have to be perfect right away, but it's a really good idea to just keep it in mind. I'm just mentally connecting these up now, and then I'll just remove it if it doesn't fit. Because then this way you can bridge it really easily. For instance, this one here is this one too many, so we can hit select it with the loops tool. Select, delete it, and then we just do dissolve edges. There we go. You can see there's a little flinch there as well. Nothing actually changed with our model. It's just the display that changed. Well, one thing changed. It deleted an edge, but that was the intended effect. So I just want to block these things out, and then I'm going to delete this one and delete this one. So delete this and delete this. Just select it with the loops tool, hit the X key, and then we will set to dissolve edges. And now you can see these are going to match up perfectly fine. And then we'll do another one around the mouth. But for the mouth, I want to enable symmetry. This is a good time to enable symmetry. So then we will again use strokes, and we'll just draw this out like so. And then we'll draw out another one. And this was a bit too heavy, actually. It was 10, so I want to just have this a bit lighter. So just maybe 8. And then we hold on a control key and we just drag this out like so. Now you can see we have nice loops. Hit the minus key, and now we have some nice topology. And now we're going to use the tweak tool to just move this up like so. And you can see the center line moves right in the actual center. You can't move this left or right, you can only move it up and down. This is also why it's so nice to keep it really low poly, because it's so much easier to move these points around. It only takes a few seconds to move this into place. And the quicker, or the better your foundation is, the easier it is going to be to add everything later on. I'm also trying to keep some of the topology just to some of the facial features here, such as maybe you see this line going down here, which is a bit like the fat around the mouth, and just trying to match it just a little bit. It doesn't have to be perfect, but the more you can do of that, the easier it's going to be. So this is my general approach for retopology. We will start now to use the PolyPen Tool. You can see how quickly we were able to block this out using exclusively the strokes tool. You can even be even faster than this if you're really trying to. I'm just trying to be a bit slow now for the purposes of the tutorial. So I'll select an edge, and then I'll hold on the control key, and then we'll just block this out like so. And again, I'm trying to mentally match these things up. It doesn't have to be perfect. We can always adjust it, but you want to be in a spot where you're not like twice off. You don't want to have 40 going into 20. Then we can take this guy and we can drag it out like so, and drag it out like so. And then I want to just get one loop going down in the middle here. You could of course just create this loop without this one, but it doesn't really hurt. And I'm trying to match this up to this. The nice thing about doing that is you kind of get it for free, in the sense that if you want to bridge this in later on, it's just so much easier to just bridge it like so. Or we can use the patches tool for this. Sometimes I do this slower route because even if it's technically a bit slower, because I don't have to switch the tools, because switching the tools can just break my flow a little bit. But in this case, we can just draw these down like so. And then we can just add some more polygons like so. And then we have to use the tweak tool, or you can use our little menu, go to tweak, and then we can just move it into the center. It's pretty important to get this into the center right away and to just make sure that the loops are nice and clean. And just trying to stick a little bit with the facial features like so. And then I'll connect this up to here. We use the PolyPen tool, then we'll click on here, and then I'll add one loop in the middle, and then we'll just start to connect it up. This is why it's so important to block it out in a clean manner in early on, because it's just so much quicker to connect things up than it is to fix it. So we're just gonna use the tweak tool a little bit. And I tend to not really use the relax tool until I have more resolution than this. There are some areas we could relax, but it generally works better if you have a lot more resolution.
You can also see how forgiving it is and easy it is to make fewer mistakes when you do work with a lower res mesh. Doing it in a methodical way like this just allows you to have much more control and takes away a lot of the second guessing of, oh, how many spans do I need to connect this up? If you create that mental image while you're retopologizing, you're sort of taking away a lot of the stress and extra work you would normally have to do from yourself.
Yeah, I'm never really thinking about, oh, I need 6 loops for this and 12 loops for this and just mathematically working it up. But like you were saying, just keeping it low just makes it so much easier.
Yeah, and just look what sort of matches up.
We're also going to be using the strokes tool for this area as well. This is like the perfect example of the strokes tool. I'm just going to give it a little more space around here. So I'm just going to move this down a little bit so it's not going to interfere with that. And then we'll use the strokes tool to drag something out here. Again, hit Alt-A before using strokes tool. You never know what nastiness can come from that. Then we just draw it out like so. And that's 14. I'm just going to decrease it a little bit. You see, my approach is I tend to decrease instead of increasing it. It's a lot easier to add things later on than it is to decrease it. And then we go over it like so. And now you can see we have a beautiful little line around it. Now, if we want to move this a bit closer, what we can do is we can use the loops tool, and then we can hit the S key, and then we can just scale it in just a little bit like so. So we just scale down everything, and this just fits a little bit better. Then we can use the tweak tool to just make this fit even better. So overall, RetopoFlow is a fantastic Retopo tool. I'm very impressed with it so far. A lot of people are asking, how does it compare to Maya's Quadro? And it's pretty solid. Like it's basically there. And now I'm just trying to match up some of these lines so we can bridge them. And this is where Retopo gets fast, or you get fast results pretty quickly when you've already laid down a proper foundation, and then you can start to bridge these things up.
Yeah, it's one easy trick where you do methodical work for a long time before, and then it's easy.
Yeah. But you can see how fast it actually is to actually start to block this in. We're not that far in. We're like 10 minutes into this. And you can see some of the major parts of the face have already been blocked in. But yeah, that's what I mean. Slow is fast when it comes to this. It means you're spending a lot of time making this right, and then you can just block in it really quickly. Now we can use the patches tool. And we can just click on it like so. And then we can hit the F key to commit. And now we can just go a bit crazy. I prefer to still do this in smaller chunks, just because it means I control what's happening a bit better.
And once you start breaking it down into, I guess, the simpler elements, especially for a face, because that can be one of the more complex things to retopologize, it does actually become pretty simple.
Yeah, it really helps me if I have some reference to look for, like simply just Googling like topology, just having something to look at, because it can be a bit tricky in the beginning to figure out what's going on.
Once you lay down that groundwork, the foundation, the small pillars around the cornerstones, then things tend to fall into place a lot easier.
It's a very nice feeling. I want to have another loop in here as well, and then we can just use the loops tool, hold on a control key, and again, control key, because everything is based around the control key. Then we can use the pen tool and just add this in here, and then we can just add this in here. And then we can start to connect some of these up as well. I won't do the whole face just because that should be its own separate series, which it might be. But this just shows you the overall concepts, how you can work from slow to fast.
One really cool thing about this approach is that when you start this low and you make it clean from the beginning, all you really have to do in order to add more topology is that you just subdivide your mesh once. And then you might tweak it a little bit afterwards, but that's a great help in adding more resolution.
Yeah, that is actually like a one weird trick where you can just keep it this low and then just subdivide it and bake it in, and it looks great. So this is where we could keep on going forever with this, but I think we made a lot of our points with how we want to approach retopology in Blender. In short, we block in the important loops first. You can look for reference in order to figure out where those loops are, and use simple tools for this. You don't have to go crazy with something like polystrips or contours. Just use simple tools, use the PolyPen tool, use the strokes tool, and just really quickly or really methodically block in the main loops. Once you blocked in the main loops, then we can use the PolyPen to connect things up. We can use patches to connect it up, and it's just really fast if you want to work that way. As a last thing though, it's a good idea afterwards to go over with the relax tool and just soften everything out.
So satisfying.
So satisfying. I found the relax tool in RetopoFlow to be really excellent. So even with low polys or high polys, it just produces a really solid result. So definitely go over that and just make your model just a lot smoother as well. So yeah, that's how you use RetopoFlow in Blender. It's a fantastic little add-on for Blender, which makes Retopology a real joy to use. So if you want to see more Retopo video using RetopoFlow or just Retopo in Blender in general, just let us know down in the comments. If you have any tips on using RetopoFlow or any general tips on Retopo, please let us know as well. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the subject.
Thank you guys so much for watching.